Continuing the series where I talk about the political figures in Portugal, and specifically the figures that are leaders of political parties with representation in parliament, today I'm going to talk about Rui Rio. Rui Rio is the current Social Democrat leader. The Social Democrats are a center-left party, and they are actually the biggest party in parliament because they won the elections in 2015. They had a coalition with a tiny center party, but they were the vast majority of the coalition, and so by winning the elections in 2015, they had the majority of people to be nominated to parliament, and that's why they are the biggest opposition force to the government in parliament right now. Rui Rio first appeared in a big position when he was mayor in a city called Porto, which is up north in Portugal. He was quite different in how he handled politics in general. He was quite different than the normal politician in Portugal, because one of the things that he tried to show was that he wasn't looking for the spotlight. He wasn't looking to be on every news possible. He wasn't looking to get all sorts of cameras in front of him as he speaks about certain subjects. This is a norm for the majority of Portuguese politicians. They want the spotlight on them. They are vain, and they think that they are very special, and that all the attention must be on them. And Rui Rio was acting quite differently when he was mayor of Porto. He would only appear when he had something to say, and usually only when an important decision had to be made. He also tried to confront certain lobbies and interests. Now, I'm sure that he didn't confront all of them, but he did confront some powerful ones. One of them is related with a football club. It's FC Porto. It's the club of Porto City, or the main club of Porto City. The club, and specifically their president, is a very, very corrupt man, a criminal actually, and he is involved in several corruption cases. The biggest was a case called Apito Dourado from a few years ago, where he and other people were corrupting referees so that the matches, or the results of the matches, the football matches, would more or less be set even before the game started. But because the Portuguese justice system is incredibly corrupt and incompetent, this man was never arrested, as well as any other person involved in this scheme. Pretty much everyone got scot-free. They had absolutely no penalty or consequence, or I mean, they had some fines to pay, but even the value of those fines were ridiculous considering the crimes that they have committed. But anyway, Rui Rio fought certain interests of the Porto Football Club, the main football club, which wasn't the norm up to that point. Every other mayor in Porto City would do exactly what the president of FC Porto wanted. But Rui Rio fought that lobby, which was refreshing and created an image of someone, in this case Rui Rio, that was not fearful of fighting these powerful lobbies or these powerful interests. But he, of course, also had his less than fortunate moments, and not necessarily because he made the wrong decision, but because in the end he wasn't able to fight certain lobbies. And one of them was related with a market called Bulhão, and Rui Rio had a project to modernize the market, and to do that he had to basically destroy the current market and build a new one. But certain interests appeared, and this was considered to be the first political defeat of Rui Rio, because the Bulhão's market issue was never resolved under his leadership in Porto as mayor of Porto. But when he left the position of mayor in Porto a few years later, the overall image that he created, a perception around his person, was that he was a tough guy, that he was not afraid to fight what had to be fought. He didn't want the spotlight. He was not looking for the attention that the majority of politicians in Portugal want. He wanted, seemingly, to do what was best for the city that he was running. And that was refreshing to see. Rui Rio created that image for himself, apparently deservingly so. It was, as I said, refreshing to see, because it's not normal in Portugal. The majority, the vast majority, I would say 98% of politicians in Portugal, they go into politics with the purpose of being corrupt, with the purpose of benefiting from the taxpayers' money, with the purpose of doing all sorts of criminal actions that will obviously hurt the country as a whole and will benefit only those that are doing those criminal actions. And that's the majority, the vast majority of politicians in Portugal. And now I have to give you some context to explain how he rose to the position of leader of the Social Democrats. Basically, Pedro Passos Coelho was the leader of the Social Democrats for quite a few years. When José Sócrates was still in power, Pedro Passos Coelho was the leader of the Social Democrats, and he eventually, when the socialists brought us our third bankruptcy in 2011, Pedro Passos Coelho rose to the position of Prime Minister because he won the elections in 2011. He made a coalition with that tiny center party to have the majority in parliament, so that the financial adjustment program could be followed properly, that is. Because when you have relative majority in parliament, meaning that you won the elections but you don't have the majority in parliament, it's very tough to govern. So Pedro Passos Coelho had to do the coalition with the center party, which isn't surprising, because they have done this sort of coalition in the past as well. Those two, the center-left and the center, they have more or less the same ideas. They always end up applying socialism anyway, but they do it more moderately, more carefully. And although I don't agree personally with the application of socialism, that is much better than doing what the socialists or what the far left do. Those try to apply socialism immediately. No rational thought, nothing is considered before applying socialism. They just want to apply it because they follow the ideology without reason, without any sort of understanding what the country actually needs to improve. They don't do that. They just want to apply socialism because that's the ideology they follow. And I completely disagree with that. The center-left and the center also do that, but more moderately. There is some thought, usually, not always, but usually around the decisions of applying socialism when the center-left and the center are in power. It's the same thing, but to a lesser extent. And in a country, as I explained several times, where the left rules, we have no right, we have absolutely no right party in parliament. And we never did, actually. So, in a country where the left rules, because center-left is still left, even if more moderate, I prefer the moderate side myself. But Pedro Passos Coelho rose to the position of Prime Minister, and with the majority that he got in Parliament by doing a coalition with the center, he was able to govern more or less normally, meaning that the problem would not come in the Parliament because they have the majority. The problems in applying the program came from other sectors. And I will talk about those in more detail in the future, in another video. Anyway, the program was applied more or less. And in 2015, the normal 4-year term for a government in Portugal, new elections were made. And surprise, surprise, the center and center-left coalition won the elections again. That was surprising because the program was very harsh. Lots of taxes, lots of cuts. But in the end, the Portuguese people seemed to have understood that the problem were the socialists that brought us the bankruptcy, so they didn't want them in power again, and they voted for the center and center-left coalition, where the main leader was Pedro Passos Coelho. But, as I explained many times, António Costa, the leader of the Socialist Party, he wanted power at all costs, so he made the coalition with the far left, and essentially created a precedent that has never happened in Portugal, where the party or the coalition that actually won the elections, isn't even part of the government. Antonio Costa just wanted to have the majority in parliament, and they were able to get it by doing a coalition with two far-left parties that gave him that majority. Pedro Passos Coelho remained as the leader of the Social Democrats. In 2017, we have a similar thing to what the United States has as midterms. Essentially, these are the elections where the mayors of each cities will be elected. The Socialists won categorically in those elections. The Social Democrats, although not having numbers very different from what they had 4 years ago in 2013, they did have a big defeat in Lisbon, which is the capital of Portugal, and so it was considered to be a defeat for the Social Democrats. Even though the overall numbers weren't that different from 4 years ago, Lisbon was a big deal, or losing Lisbon was a big deal. And so Pedro Passos Coelho decided to step down as the leader of the Social Democrats.